Hi guys, I'm not sure whether I'll be here for the start of the lesson or not. If I'm not, then I've left you this video so that we can get started with the new topic. I hope you guys all had a great holiday and ready to get into it. If you're not sure what we're doing this semester, or this term rather, it's Python, programming with Python. So hopefully you all enjoy that. Um, we'll try and we need to work pretty hard for the first few weeks because we need to get the assessment task done. I don't know what week it will be. Everything's a bit mixed up, but usually about week 5, we need to probably get something handed in. Okay, so we're under a lot of pressure to learn some programming, do some programming, and get it all done. And then in the second half of the term, we'll have free to do more complex and more interesting projects. So you might find you'll have to work pretty hard in this subject for a few weeks this term, okay? So what I've done is I have added a page to our website for Python, and if you click on the snake, you will get to a website that I've already set up for programming with Python. So what I want is to run through some of these lessons here. You can follow along on the screen. Now, I've already done this lesson with the other class, and before we even started with this, what we did start with was a bit of a refresher course on what are the major components of a computer. And when we chatted about it, we came up with pretty much this model. And the ones that we're really interested in are CPU, RAM, and storage. Now, storage can either be an SSD or a hard disk. It can be computer chips or it can be a spinning disk. Modern computers nowadays, probably you'll find an SSD. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit, and it's the brains of the thing, right? It can accept instructions and it can execute instructions and use the resources of the computer to produce some output for you. RAM is the memory, the working memory of the computer, random access memory. And basically, this is really fast storage that the computer has. Its disadvantage is that if you turn the power off, then it loses everything that's in storage, that's in memory, sorry. Finally, we have storage. So storage is like long-term storage of information. So say, for example, if you have a file, it would be stored in storage, okay? And say you say you want to run a program. Say you've got, I don't know, MuseScore, right? You've got MuseScore that your music teacher wants you to run. So it would be stored in storage, and you would go to the start menu and you would click on it. And what would happen is it would take a copy of that program, copy it into your RAM, and then the CPU would take the first instruction of that program and start executing it. All right. So this is the sort of nuts and bolts of what we're using at the moment. GPU, by the way, is a graphics processor unit. We don't have to worry about that. So I'm telling you this because now we're going to start programming in earnest. We really need to think about what the computer is, what the program is, what programs do for us. And basically what programs do for us is that they're a set of instructions that we can save in our storage and get the CPU to execute so that it will manipulate or utilize our resources in the computer to produce whatever output we're after. Okay, so it's sort of just a bit of background to keep in the back of your mind. We go through this in a lot more detail next year. If you do the accelerated course at all, you would do this in more detail. But for our purposes, that's enough information. All right, so if we go to the programming site, lesson 0 actually has instructions for how to install Python. So it's a funny thing, but we're going to be writing Python code, but what we need to do is download a program called Python to run our programs. So we're basically downloading a program to run programs, okay? I'm going to leave you pause the video, follow those instructions. Hopefully they work. I didn't get a chance to test them with the other class. If it doesn't install or there's any problems, don't panic. We'll sort it out next time we see each other. But hopefully all you guys managed to install Python and it's all working well. All right, so let's get into lesson 1. If you don't feel like listening to me talking about this, you should be able to just read these I don't know, instructions, I guess. And a lot of it's what we were just talking about here. So it's discussing that a program is a sequence of instructions that tells a computer what to do. And the resources of the computer are used to carry out these instructions. And then it describes RAM, which we talked about, CPU, and storage. We've talked about all of that. So Python, maybe I might change the resolution of my screen. Let's see. Well, that didn't work. Okay, maybe what I'll do is pump up the... Okay. Yep. Okay. Let's see. So Python is a program now. It's getting is a programming language rather, or a computer language. It's getting pretty old. It was made in 1991. And it's pretty popular for learning. Obviously, there's thousands of computer programming languages we could have learned. Python is just one of them. Some of the advantages of Python are that it's easy for humans to read and relatively easy to learn as a first language. There's a lot of online resources, which is really cool. And one that I'll be sending you to quite often is the W3 Schools. But if you have a different website that you're particularly keen on learning Python, then go for it. One thing I can say about learning any language, and that goes for CSS or HTML or whatever, the more time you put into it, studying, doing work apart from what I give you, will make your skills so much higher. It's really hard to cover all the material you need to cover in class. So I would very much recommend to you guys, feel free to teach yourself this stuff, okay? To be learning on your own in your own time. All right, syntax. So syntax, you know something about syntax now because of HTML and CSS. So it's the set of rules that are used to define the language, actually. When we talk about computer programming languages, we often talk about high-level and low-level languages. Python is a high-level language. In other words, it's fairly easy for humans to read. On the other hand, computers themselves like very low-level languages. So the CPU, when it runs, it likes all of its information to be at a very low level. And for this reason, what happens is that's why we have to install Python, because what it does is it converts our code from Python into a very low-level language that the CPU can execute. One important note, all the usual things about syntax that you learnt with HTML and CSS apply. They're fairly pedantic. Minor changes, minor problems can cause big errors. But one unusual thing about the syntax of Python is indenting. So unlike nearly all programming languages, Python uses indenting as part of its syntax. So for HTML or CSS, we could indent or not indent. It would make it harder or easier to read by a human, but in terms of the computer executing the code, it made no difference. Here, however, if we get our indenting wrong, our execution will not work properly. Okay, so keep that in mind. Compile versus interpret, I'll let you just read that. Program readability, here I'm talking about putting hashes for comments and things like that. I'll let you read about that, and I'll let you read about that. So what I really want you to get done today is go through what's the contents of this, and if you can start on lesson 2 and do lesson 2B, try and get a Hello World program running. All right, so what you'll need to do is you'll need to get Python installed, and then you'll need to go to Visual Studio Code, and you will need to write the instructions for running a Python program. And then within Visual Studio Code itself, there's an option to run your program. So that's what I would set as your first target for this lesson. If you can't get it working, if you're stuck on installing Python, don't worry, we'll sort it out next lesson, okay? Otherwise, I will see you guys next lesson, and yeah, enjoy Python.